Ads have plagued the internet for pretty much as long as online businesses have been around, and if you want to use it without being bombarded by ads and trackers, you're going to need some kind of ad block solution. There's a few ways to tackle the problem. One of the more well-known solutions is to use a browser extension, most notably uBlock Origin. This browser extension is so powerful that Google tried to put it out of business by deprecating the Manifest v2 APIs in the Chromium project that the advanced features of this ad blocker depend on. Well, officially, Google deprecated the APIs to improve browser security, but personally, I think the bottom line was the real security goal with that particular update. So in Chrome, Edge, and pretty much every other Chromium-based browser, which is most browsers these days, you'll have to settle for something like uBlock Origin Lite, which, as the name implies, is a lighter weight version of the original extension. It's still pretty good, but it's missing a lot of those power user features that make uBlock Origin so powerful. Luckily, full power uBlock Origin is still available on Firefox-based browsers since it uses a different browser engine and different extension API. This extension is so good that the privacy-hardened browser LibreWolf actually ships with it pre-installed. Out of the box, uBlock enables a pretty solid collection of blocking lists, including Easy List for ads, Easy Privacy for tracking, uBlock's own filters, and a malicious URL block list. Now, these block lists are the secret sauce that most all ad blocking software have in common. These lists contain tens of thousands of rules that can be separated into filters that define what should be blocked and exceptions that define what content should be displayed. A pretty common pattern you'll see in these lists is /images/ads, which simply targets the images directory and its ads subdirectory, which of course contains images that are used by the ads. So the filter rule simply tells the ad blocker to not display any content from this images ads directory when the web page loads. Filters can be more specific, like these ones with the $! sign that tell the ad blocker to remove a specific element from a web page. Easy List is the most popular blocking list used by most ad blockers, but if you go into the filter list section of uBlock Origin, you'll find a bunch of extra lists that aren't enabled by default, and this is where you can start tuning the extension for exactly what you want to get rid of. For example, you can enable extra annoyance list to start getting rid of things that aren't technically ads, but are almost as annoying as ads popping up blocking your content. Cookie notices, newsletters, pop-ups, social media widgets, and the seemingly mandatory box asking you to download the web page's mobile app can all be targeted through these additional filters. You can also add regional lists for websites outside of the normal English language Easy List covers, or import your own third-party filter list if there is something specific you want to block. uBlock will periodically update subscribe lists for you, so this isn't something that you should have to maintain by hand every morning. Now, you might think that more filters means better ad blocking, but enabling too many filters can cause some of them to interfere with each other and break certain websites, making it harder to view the content that you want without ads. So start with the default list and add annoyance or privacy list that you actually want, and only start piling on random third-party lists when you have a reason to. Otherwise, eventually some login form is going to disappear and you're going to spend 20 minutes blaming the website for not loading correctly. And when a filter list doesn't catch something, uBlock also gives you an element picker. You can click the eyedropper tool, select some obnoxious banner or floating box on the page, and then create a cosmetic filter that hides that element whenever you visit the site. This is one of the important differences between an actual browser content blocker and some of the network level solutions that we'll get into later. uBlock doesn't just block connections from an advertising server, it can actually look at the structure of the web page and remove individual DOM elements from what the browser renders. If you want to go further down the rabbit hole, uBlock also has a logger that lets you watch requests being made by a page to see what rules are blocking them. From there, you can write your own filters in the My Filter section. There can be simple rules that are blocking a URL all the way up to cosmetic filters, scriptlets, redirects, and other rules designed to deal with websites that try to work around conventional ad blocking. At that point, uBlock starts to go from being a simple browser extension to more like a tiny firewall that's bolted directly onto your browser. There's also an advanced dynamic filtering mode where you can create rules based on things like first-party and third-party requests, scripts, or frames. This gives you a ridiculous amount of control, but it's also the point where you can break half of the internet if you start clicking buttons without really understanding what they do. Dynamic rules can override static filter rules, so this is probably something that most people should just leave alone unless they actually want that level of control and to go through the process of understanding that level of control. The nice part, though, is that none of this is required to just get good ad blocking. Simply installing the extension or downloading a browser like LibreWolf that pre-bundles uBlock Origin is going to get you 90% of the way there. But the complicated stuff is there for when you need it instead of it just being forced on everybody and forcing everybody to learn it. Now, if all of that still sounds like too much screwing around with browser extensions, Brave takes a different approach. Instead of installing uBlock Origin into the browser, Brave builds its own content blocker directly into the browser with Brave Shield, so there's not something separate that you have to install. When you install Brave, the ad and tracker blocker is already sitting there in the address bar waiting to ruin some marketing company's quarterly analytics report. Under the hood, Brave's ad blocker is powered by a native Rust engine called AdBlock Rust. It uses a lot of the same block list as uBlock Origin and also supports network blocking, cosmetic filtering, resource replacement, host style rules, and even a number of uBlock Origin syntax extension and scriptlet resources. Because this is native functionality built into Brave, rather than an extension running through Chromium's extension API, Brave can do this kind of filtering without depending on Manifest v2 being available in the browser. Brave also gives you a simple slider to change the levels of blocking, similar to what you get with uBlock Lite. Standard mode focuses on third-party advertising and tracking while trying to avoid breaking websites. If you change the tracker and ad blocking setting to aggressive, then Brave is also going to start blocking first-party ads, which is an ad being served directly from the same website that you're visiting to view content, which gets a little bit more complicated. So just like with using overly aggressive settings in uBlock Origin, the more aggressive settings for Brave Shields have a greater chance of making some badly designed websites throw a tantrum and not display the content that you want to see. And Brave actually exposes quite a bit of the machinery behind Shield. So if you want to dig deeper than just the simple slider, you can go to Brave:/settings/shields/filters. And from here, you can enable additional filter lists. You can force an update and create your own custom filters. Brave also supports subscribing to compatible third-party lists, so you're not completely stuck with just whatever Brave decides to ship. You can even block specific elements on a web page and have those rules stored with your custom filters, which gets you surprisingly close to some of the everyday functionality that a lot of people use uBlock Origin for. Now, that doesn't mean that Brave Shields and uBlock Origin are exactly the same thing. uBlock gives power users a much deeper set of tools for inspecting requests, creating filtering rules, and controlling exactly how the browser communicates with different resources. For most normal users, that trade-off is probably pretty reasonable. Without ticking the advanced user feature in uBlock Origin, you actually do get a fairly similar experience to using Brave, but for the person who has 17 custom rules blocking JavaScript from a toaster company's website, uBlock Origin with advanced user features is going to be the best browser-based ad blocker. But now if we zoom out from your computer's web browser into the full spectrum of digital device ads, you quickly realize that these browser-based blockers are missing a lot. uBlock Origin protects the browser, where you installed the uBlock Origin extension. Brave Shields protects traffic going through the Brave browser, but neither one is going to reach out of your browser on that specific device and then stop the weather app on your phone or some free-to-play game or your smart TV or the sketchy piece of software that came pre-installed with your printer from phoning home to an advertising server. This is where ad blocking starts to get more advanced, because instead of trying to block the advertisement inside of a specific application on a specific device, you can move the filter further down the network stack. One of the most common ways people do this is with something like a Pi-hole. So Pi-hole describes itself as a DNS sinkhole, and unlike a browser extension, it doesn't need to be installed on every device you're trying to protect. It only needs to be installed on one network. So you run it on a Linux machine somewhere on your network. Usually people run it on a Raspberry Pi, which is where it gets the name Pi-hole from, but really any always-on Linux box will do. And then you point your devices at that device that you're running the Pi-hole software on for your DNS server. The easiest way to make that network wide is usually through your router. Normally, your router's DHCP server gives every static device an IP address along with the address of a DNS server that it should use. So instead of sending those devices straight to your ISP, Google DNS, Cloudflare, or whatever resolver you normally use in your router, you hand them the address of your Pi-hole. So then your laptop, your phone, smart TV, literally every device that you have can send their DNS request through that same filtering server to avoid displaying ads on them. When one of those devices asks for the IP address of a domain, the Pi-hole checks the domain against its blocking rules, and then if that domain is blocked, Pi-hole stops the request there. And of course, this can be used for filtering all kinds of other content besides just advertisements. And if the content isn't blocked, Pi-hole will forward the request to an upstream DNS resolver and return the answer to the client, thus giving you the content on that web page. This is a much more blunt instrument, though, than browser-based blockers, but it's also why it works with so many different things. The Pi-hole doesn't care whether the request is coming from Firefox, whether it's coming from a mobile game, Windows telemetry, or a smart TV that apparently needs to tell 6 different companies every single time you open up Netflix. It just sends a DNS query and decides whether that domain can be resolved or not. AdGuard is another Pi-hole-like device that supports native encryption and easy-to-configure parental controls. Both AdGuard and the Pi-hole support per-client device settings, which means that you can apply different filtering behavior to different devices. So maybe your desktop can get really aggressive filtering while some IoT device gets its own rules because blocking one analytics domain somehow causes a light bulb to forget what the color blue is. AdGuard Home also supports encrypted DNS protocols for clients that you configure to use them. Now, the downside to DNS filtering is that it has no idea what is actually happening inside of the web page or inside of the application that you're trying to block ads or block certain types of content in. So if ads.example.com is only used for serving advertising, then you can just block that entire domain. But if example.com serves both the content you want and the advertisement that you don't want, aka a first-party ad, then sadly, DNS can't tell the difference and do element-based blocking like the browser-based ad blockers can. As far as the DNS server is concerned, both requests are asking for how to reach example.com. And so that's why the DNS blockers have trouble with things like Facebook or Twitch ads or sponsored posts that come from the same domain as the real content. DNS filtering also can't clean up the web page if removing an ad breaks the user interface. So if a Pi-hole blocks an ad, which leaves a giant empty rectangle in the middle of the article, it can't modify the DOM to remove that gap to give you a better viewing experience, which is one of the big advantages that uBlock Origin and Brave have over the basic DNS blockers, which is why the best solution for ad blocking is a layered approach. Of course, the browser-based content filters are the easiest to set up. Sometimes it's as easy as just installing a new browser, while using Pi-hole, AdGuard, or any other DNS-based, network-wide solution literally gets you into the world of self-hosting and setting up an always-on device to run on your network. But if you consume content outside of your desktop browser, it's definitely worth taking that plunge if you want to enjoy an ad-free internet experience. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share Attack the Algorithm, and check out my online store, based.win, where you can buy my awesome merch or accessories for your phone or laptop. 10% store-wide discount when you pay with Monero XMR at checkout. Have a great rest of your day.